counted among the outlaws. He said, "Come, follow me." People from all walks of life since have been becoming outlaws.
If you are a fan of the God's Not Dead movies, I've got awesome news for you. One is about to be released. How many do you think there were? One, you see them, you go to them. Two, you think there's two? Not The Walking Dead. There's tons of those episodes. This is the God's Not Dead movies. There's now 5. The newest installment is God's Not Dead, In God We Trust. And if you've watched them, you'd recognize the main character is always a pastor, Reverend David Hill. That's played by David A.R. White. And he's also been the lead in dozens, probably more than that, of other films. And you may not realize he's kind of a big shooter. He's a co-founder of the streaming service PureFlix, as well as Pinnacle Peak Pictures. You have to say that slow. Who creates faith-based films. In the latest God's Not Dead, Scott Baio plays a dominant part. Who doesn't love when Scott Baio pops into a TV show or a movie? He plays this great person you love to hate in it. And Scott doesn't need much of an introduction. He became a household name early on as Chachi in Happy Days, Charles in Charge. His acting and directing credits, they're long. Both Scott and David are here to chat about their new movie. Welcome, fellas.
Well, thank you.
That was quite an entrance.
You've probably had more thorough and better, but come on, people know who the God's Not Dead guy is, and they know who Scott Baio is. So, cut to the chase.
I agree. Let's just cut to the chase. We're a big deal. We're a big deal here.
You are. Yeah, I called you a big shooter. That's right. You are a big shooter. Here's what I did. Of course, I watched this latest one, but I thought, I'm going to start over because God's Not Dead. That's been quite a while now, over a decade or something.
No, this year's our 10-year anniversary.
Wow. Yeah, I thought, I'm going to refresh myself. So I watched it. Then I went into the, I'm going to do a binge. I literally spent all night. I watched all 5 in a row.
Come on.
I did. I'm thoroughly convinced that God's Not Dead now. So good work there.
Was that last night you did this?
No, I didn't do it last night. I did about a couple weeks ago, actually. Yeah.
Was it a Friday night or a Saturday or Tuesday or what day was this?
No, it was a weeknight. Yeah, I didn't mean to. I just started, it was like a 9:30 and I ended up, you add 9 or 10 hours to that. And that's when I finished.
I mean, wow. Did you do that with Joni Loves Chachi?
Yeah.
It's franchise.
I told my sister I was going to talk to you and Scott, and one of her favorite shows still is Joni Loves Chachi.
See, Scott, still.
That says a lot about your sister. Not good.
Hey, speaking of those days, so David, you're being the son of a minister and a Mennonite minister. Did you grow up? Were you able to watch Chachi or that kind of thing, Happy Days?
Yeah, it was a weird thing. I mean, I saw one movie in the theater the first 18 years of my life, right? So we couldn't go to movies.
What was the movie?
Well, the movie was Grease. Yeah. Wow. I was with a friend. I went to a friend's house, and then their parents were like, we're going to the movies. And next thing you know, I'm in the movie theater, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this, right? It was 10 or something like that. And then the next thing I know, I remember seeing Olivia Newton-John wearing black tights, thinking for sure I am going to hell.
Yeah, right.
I never saw another movie for another 8 some years. Yeah, but what we did have is we did have a TV, and we did and I did grow up watching Happy Days, and I didn't watch too much of Joni Loves Chachi. It was too that was
nobody did
for me.
We did. I did. My sister did. It was on.
But I'm a big Scott Baio fan.
That's a whole
even now, even to this day, after God's Not Dead, In God We Trust, I'm even a bigger Scott Baio fan.
Well, thank you, David. Appreciate that.
Scott, Chachi is a cool character. But to me, I don't know you at all. But listening to you talk or just seeing you in the media, I know you're way different than what were you, Fonzie's cousin or something. But with the accent, it really kind of sounds like you. I mean, you seem like a grown-up Chachi, kind of.
I basically am. What, my New York accent? I guess I've never really lost it. But that was me 40 years ago, and now this is me more than 40 years ago.
Where are you at now? So we'll talk about specifically the film, but so I've watched
the film. What, let's talk about
the Shoot the Breeze. So I've listened to both of your podcasts, and they're both very good. Scott Baio's take on life, I love that.
Thank you.
It's so.
Wait. Did you listen to Scott Baio on the White House pod, Dare to Dream? On my podcast?
I did listen to that one.
Or does Scott Baio have his own podcast? You have your own podcast, Scott?
Yes.
I didn't know this.
It's Scott Baio's take on life. It's like, you tell him what it is? It's your podcast.
You can tell him, Ken. It's fine. It's me and two buddies of mine, and we just talk about
important things,
just stuff in life. Going to the airport or eating in a restaurant, and the things you have
you tell the plumber if his pants need to be pulled up? Exactly. Important things.
Are my earlobes too big, and how your body changes? That's weird stuff. Just stuff that people just talk about all the time, and they're afraid to. Anyway, that's my podcast.
I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. They're like 15 or 20 minutes long.
I just went to Spotify to download your podcast, and instead it's like the Scott Baio album.
That's even better. That's even better than the podcast.
Boys Are Out Tonight by Scott Baio. I love this. Man, yeah. I got to do more research.
You got to do more research on me.
So a little more profound is Scott Baio's real take on life. I mean, those are the little takes on life. But, from a seasoned person now, I don't know if it's how you viewed Hollywood then or how you view it now or your perspective on life. Or how does faith play into that? What's your worldview these days, and has it morphed over time? What's important to you now, and then how did you get there?
I think as you age, certainly your priorities change. I mean, when I was a younger man, my priorities were work, and that's really what drives you. And then as you get older and you have a child, what drives you is your child. And my job is to provide my daughter with the tools she needs to do what she wants to do in life. And that's pretty much it. And my worldview on, I was raised a Catholic, and about a year or two ago, I became a Christian, was baptized again. And so that's where I'm still the same guy, but I just decided to go down a little bit of a different path, and that's what my worldview is. Very, very simplistic.
Yeah, I think the proper worldview is not complicated. It's a straightforward path.
Oh, I can complicate it, but I try to be as simple as I can.
I think that's why we have women, right?
Exactly. Oh, God, yeah, exactly.
So, David, with this new movie, my first thought when I saw the title, right, even before I watched it, was, wow, what timing? Was that purposeful, or did it just kind of happen to play out in a political season? So lay out, just obviously at the point of this podcast, nobody has seen it yet. What's a synopsis of the movie? And, and it fits any time, not just a political season. Was that kind of purposeful? If not, it seems providential to me.
Yeah. I'd have to actually say it was a bit providential. The script started about 3 years ago, and it kind of followed suit. And you binged all of them, so it kind of comes after We the People. It makes sense, but that Reverend Dave would be after. It leads into that. But did we know that so much would be going on in the world of politics at the time? No. I don't think anybody could have imagined, what this year has been in the political presidential race, even so to speak. But also in so many different ways. There's a stat about 40 million American Christians don't vote in presidential elections. We didn't know that at the time, but in the process of the discovery of it, you start to realize, wow, that's actually true, and that's a problem. And and the movie takes shape in different ways. to answer some of these things that need to be talked about in our culture. And here we are, you know, it's like every single God's Not Dead movie has kind of done this in its own way for when it comes out. You know, it kind of resonates with where the country was at the time, what's going on with culture, and where do Christians fit into that. And here we are again, you know, it's election season. This is an election movie, or it's the backdrop of an election movie. And I run for politics, you know, for Congress. And as Christians, you know, so often people of faith don't want to be involved in politics because it's a dirty business. But if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Yeah. Yeah. And Scott, when I was asking about your worldview, wouldn't you say that you mentioned your daughter, that even just having kids, and David, you could speak on this too, but whether it's the political environment or the media or just the social environment or the schools they go to and this and that, but that even if it's a Christian worldview, it begins to get pinpoint. I think what I'm trying to say is, I think you become more serious, bolder, and you stand up more for the sake of your kids. It's easier to be quiet because you're kind of quieting down on the couch as an older person. I'm speaking for myself. But when you have kids involved, launching into that world, for me, that makes you kind of want to rise and do something that you can about it, just to help pave a path for them.
Yeah.
Does that ring true to you?
Well, absolutely. As you go through life, you're young man, you're pretty selfish. You take care of what you need to take care of. And then a child or children come along and you have a different role. You have a different purpose. So you absolutely, it's your responsibility. It's my responsibility and my wife's, nobody else's. It's our responsibility to raise our child. So everything else goes on the back burner, or everything else sort of becomes less of a priority. And I think most people, that's what happens. Some people are not very good parents, and that's the way life is. But you know, your priorities change completely.
Yeah. And David, for you, just being in the film industry, you've been in it so long, and I'm sure it's easy to say you started super young, and your thoughts of your purpose has changed over time. But has it really kicked in? Have you went from like just trying to make it in Hollywood and have a career to, you ever foresee where you're at now as a pretty major influence in a segment of ministry that was untouched before?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody can foresee, you know, where they're going, or obviously where they're going to be, and what culture and country kind of looks like. As the last, you know, 10, 15 years, it's been crazy to see where we're going. But you know, one of our goals and early early dreams were to have a faith-based genre that didn't really exist. You know, 150 million people go to church once a month. That was a stat a couple of years back. I'm not sure if that's still the same after COVID, because I think we saw a tremendous amount of hit, you know, in faith, the people going out in that way. But certainly there's half the country identifies as being, you know, people of faith. And yet there's hardly any movies ever made, or there weren't hardly any movies ever made for people in this, you know, in this arena. And so that was one of our goals, is at an early age, years and years ago, 2005 is when we started PureFlix, to be one of the first faith-based production and distribution studios that would release this content and make it on an ongoing basis. And so I've been amazed to see how the different studios have all kind of come in, you know, with different faith-based labels, and more Christians are putting these out, but I would also just love to see it continue to grow. You know, you just never know where it's going to go. And the God's Not Dead franchise has been around, you know, this is our 10-year anniversary. And so it's, you know, these movies seem to be relevant for such a time as this, specifically whatever's going on in culture at the time. And this one too, God's Not Dead, In God We Trust, certainly, you know, hits a time. The movie, I think, it resonates with right where we're at right now.
Yeah, I think what's great about these, I think one of the weaknesses sometimes of part 1s and 2s and 3s that they just go after, it was financially successful, so they're going to ride the franchise until it's not. The God's Not Dead movies it's not just stretching a continual story to the point of ridiculousness. It's perfect because it's just a progression of different topics going on in the culture that either a teenager or a college student run to, or a homeschooling parents, or the struggles of a pastor's life and the politics that play into that. So there's such a myriad. It just seems like they could keep going without stretching the topic, just because there's so many avenues or chapters it could go that are true to where people are at.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, we're not trying to be the Fast and the Furious, you know, although they have 10, so we have quite a long ways to go. But I wouldn't have 10 years ago said that we'd even have, you know, this would be the 5th installment. And the irony, hopefully, is that, you know, more and more people say this is, again, everybody has their own opinions, but a lot of people in the screenings have even said this is their favorite one out of all of them. Yeah. So hopefully each movie is getting progressively better. But the goal is not that we make a better movie. The goal is just that it's A, entertaining, B, it inspires people to hope and to encourage them in their faith walk. But also that it lands right in the middle of where our country is and our culture is, and where does God fit in that? And this one specifically is like Christians, you know, separation of church and state. Now you got Christians in politics. Are Christians even supposed to be involved in politics? Are we supposed to be? Are people of faith supposed to be involved in politics, or should we just step back?
Yeah,
there's a lot of relevant questions.
Yeah, I'd say the answer is yes. You just got to really be ready for it. Thick skin. Scott Bale's got thick skin. You know, Hollywood guy, and he's got principles. Speaking of Scott, what's your career? What do you look at when you're doing, what do you look for in work? Do you kind of pick and choose what you want to do? Do you do things that just interest you, or have some kind of...
Quite honestly, I was canceled from about 2017, maybe on, because of my campaigning for President Trump, and I knew I would be. I didn't care. So now I'm just sort of coming back, and I was fortunate enough to hook up with David on a movie that we did a couple of years ago during COVID called Courting Mom and Dad.
Great movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
It was fun. Yeah, and David came up to me and he says, you want to do this movie, and would your daughter want to play your daughter? And I went, well, of course she would. So we did that, and then he asked me to do this, and I honestly, Ken, I don't have the luxury of picking and choosing.
Yeah.
But some stuff happens to choose me, and I'm in a place right now where I'm lucky enough to work for David, and it's a good place to be.
Yeah. Well, you know, if any of us are truly accepted by everyone around us in the culture we're in, we're probably not in the right place where we should be. So I respect you and your grit, and David, for you and all the work you do. Where do you want people to see this film? Hopefully
in the theater. You know, September 12th, it opens all over the US. But it's important for people to know, you know, it's like if you don't go out that opening weekend, for example, you know, that sends the biggest message to Hollywood that says, hey, you know, these films are viable, and there's a hunger for them. And ultimately it also sends a message to that theaters then leave it in the theater longer. But if people don't for example, like that stat that says 40 million American Christians don't vote. If you don't go out and vote, even for a movie, for hey, I want to see more of these movies, then things go away. And it's the same thing as in the movie too, is if you don't get out and actually vote, then more and more, as we're seeing, our country's not going to look like it did.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm sure it'll do great. It's a good movie. I saw it. Scott, you did a great job in it. Absolutely despised you, which means you did awesome.
Perfect.
All right. I appreciate you both. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation going under.
Now more than ever, Christians must realize that we are being called to deliver hope to a country that's feeling hopeless. Faith begins where your comfort zone ends. We need to step out into that faith.
We're 6 weeks out from Election Day, and a lot of folks have lost hope in the future of our country.
We must maintain a wall of separation between church and state. Religion has no place in the public square.
Once they bankrupt our country, they will have complete control.
Where did we go wrong, Lord?
We need someone who can light a fire in the voters.
The preacher. He helped on those education hearings.
I've been hired to manage your campaign for Congress.
I'm not a politician.
If you don't take on this fight, we could lose everything.
They found someone to run against you.
Are we worried about a preacher?
My next guest is a candidate for Congress. You're going to get a lot of questions about your faith.
Well, maybe people are looking for more spiritual and moral leadership in Washington.
You're making God an easy target for them, Pastor.
God's not the target, Lottie. Our country is. God's just standing in their way.
I will not be made a fool of. I won't stop until your moral high ground crumbles beneath your feet.
You don't win unless you play by their rules.
I feel like I have two options. I can either do the things my faith asks me not to, or I lose this race. It's like God keeps putting these impossible mountains in front of me.
Perhaps God put those mountains in front of you to show that they can be moved.
Please pray for David, guys.
In God we trust.
This contest is about shaping the future of our nation.
Keep your boy in line. Because like his God, I can give it and I can take it away.
How do you know it's God?
Reverend Hill, your beliefs are a textbook example of Christian nationalism.
Whenever anyone of faith promotes a policy that you don't like, you label them a Christian nationalist. We need to stand up. Send the message to Washington. Tell them you're not ready to give that power up. You have the power to change things. Not me, not him, you.
In God we trust. And without God, democracy will not and cannot long endure.
Counted among the outlaws, he said, "Come, follow me." People from all walks of life since have been becoming outlaws.